Okay, guys, Jake Paul and Logan Paul, two really rich, two really famous brothers. Who's making more money? I was kind of curious about it, so I looked it up, and you're going to be really surprised with Jake Paul, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So right off the bat, we're going to go ahead and answer the question, how much is Jake Paul and Logan Paul worth individually? So I went and looked it up, and this is all off of public records. You know, they make a lot of money through a lot of different private companies, so it's not readily available, but there's a lot of analysts that have estimated that Jake Paul's net worth is about $200 million right now, and Forbes ranks him number 3 for the influencer list for the most income yearly. He is estimated to make about $50 million per year. Now, when we compare that with his brother, that's worth supposedly about $150 million, and that comes from revenue from YouTube, brand partnerships, WWE appearances, his podcast, but most notable is his very successful drink. The name is Prime. So as of the recording of this video, it looks like Jake Paul is worth about $50 million more than his brother Logan Paul. But here's the interesting part. Logan Paul, Jake Paul built their fortunes in two different parts of the entertainment world, and which one of these brothers is going to have a more sustainable future? That's really going to be an open question. So let's go ahead and look at Jake Paul. How did Jake Paul make all of this money? So Jake Paul's wealth creation up to $200 million is really an unlikely story in today's sports world, especially considering he started on YouTube pranking people, doing comedy skits, and that's when people thought he was just a joke, especially when he went the other direction and decided to become a professional boxer. In fact, a lot of his boxing purses have reached legendary status, especially if you consider the purse against Anthony Joshua. Supposedly Jake Paul made $92 million just from that one fight. I mean, think about that for a second. A former YouTuber got paid $92 million for a boxing event. In fact, that wasn't just a one-off payday. Supposedly he's earned about $40 million per year through the past 4 years alone just from boxing. And in addition to his boxing venture, he supposedly had started a venture fund that's called Anti-Fund, and it's housing different brands like W, which is a body care brand, but also he has stakes in companies like Ramp that's supposedly valued at $32 billion, and also Anduril, which supposedly is valued at about $60 billion. So as you can see, Jake Paul is not just a YouTuber or a boxer. He's building some serious investment portfolios, and that's not something you see in the news about Jake Paul front and center. So let's go ahead and jump over and take a look at Logan Paul. How did Logan Paul make $150 million? So if we look into Logan Paul, he went a completely different path than Jake Paul. He didn't go into sports. He went into the investment path. In fact, one of his biggest investments has been extraordinary. So in 2022, Logan Paul founded the beverage brand Prime. He went into business with another famous YouTuber, KSI. And when they launched the drink brand on launch day, there were lines around various different stores just to get their hands on Prime. And supposedly their first year in business, they did $250 million in revenue, which is monstrous for a new company. Also, Prime signed a contract with UFC to be their drink of choice. Supposedly this partnership is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So this gets Prime front and center with a very popular sport and brand, UFC. So a lot of analysts say that Logan Paul owns about 20% of the Prime business. So if they decide to take Prime public, that could put Logan Paul's stake between $50 million and $200 million in value. In addition to his Prime business, Logan Paul does make appearances on the WWE. Supposedly his contract is worth $15 million over the span of 3 years. He also has his podcast Impulsive, which is one of the most downloaded podcasts available. And this is in addition to his YouTube revenue stream, since he is a very popular YouTuber. So as you can see, Logan Paul has built his revenue streams various different paths instead of just betting everything on the farm with one massive bet like Jake Paul. So you might be asking yourself, who made a smarter business decision, Jake Paul or Logan Paul? So this is where it gets really interesting. As you can see, both of these brothers have made excellent financial decisions, especially since they're starting as just basic YouTubers. So if we look at Jake's smartest move was recognizing that boxing could be more than just a sport. It could very well be a promotional machine, and that's why he founded Most Value Promotions in 2021. And that way, when Jake Paul is fighting on his own card, he's making money as the fighter, but he's also making promotional profits as well. And anytime you can bring in revenue from both sides of the transaction, it's definitely a clever financial structure. Now, if we look back at Logan Paul, his smartest financial decision appears to be his Prime brand, and that's because Prime leveraged the popularity of two really famous YouTubers, Logan Paul and KSI. Because of that, there were lines stretched around the block just to get your hands on a bottle of Prime. And when you think about building a real consumer product, that's a completely different business than just making YouTube videos or creating boxing matches. In fact, the really interesting thing about it is it creates lasting equity value, and it's not really dependent on Logan Paul making YouTube videos or even staying famous for that matter. So I would say that Jake Paul and Logan Paul really made excellent financial decisions. However, with the brand of Prime, Prime, it probably has a more potential long-term upside since it is a consumer product. So as you know, not everything is roses in business. So which one of these two brothers made the biggest financial mistakes? The thing is that both of these brothers have both had very public financial disasters, which have cost them a lot of money and then also a lot of reputation. So if we look at Jake Paul, his biggest financial mishap was probably his involvement with various crypto investments, which left a lot of his viewers with losses. He also supposedly was facing a $2.5 million lawsuit from his neighbors and landlords over noise complaints and damages when he rented his mansion. Also, if we look over to his Anthony Joshua fight, he did make $92 million, which is a huge amount of money, but he did lose the fight and suffered a lot of physical harm to his jaw and his teeth. And that raises the question, is being a boxer going to be sustainable for the long term, especially as his opponents get tougher and tougher? Now, if we jump over to his brother, Logan Paul, his biggest financial mishap was probably his involvement in something called Crypto Zoo. This is all the way back in 2021 when he promoted it to play and earn cryptocurrency. And many of his investors were just young viewers of his YouTube channel that bought tokens expecting the game to launch. However, that game was never materialized. And because of that, the token's value collapsed. So supposedly the investors lost about $3 million on that project that was spearheaded by Logan Paul. And as of right now, the refund process for that is surrounded by a lot of different legal disputes. So as you can see, both Jake Paul and Logan Paul have both used crypto, and then it ultimately led to their investors losing money. However, with Crypto Zoo and Logan Paul, it's been a lot more public and there's a lot more data on that. So which one of these brothers has a more stable income, Jake Paul or Logan Paul? So if we look at stability on their income paths, the answer is actually pretty clear. If we look at Jake Paul, his income is almost entirely dependent on one thing: big boxing matches happening regularly. So with his boxing revenue, it includes payouts from his Anthony Joshua fight in 2025, like I said, where he got paid somewhere between $92 and $93 million before fees and taxes, even though he lost the fight, which is extraordinarily large for a fight. But as we know, boxing careers don't last forever. His opponents are getting bigger, stronger, more experienced, and even just one bad injury or a string of losses could collapse that side of the income for Jake Paul. Now, if we look at his brother, Logan Paul, his income is much more diversified. He has his payments from WWE, which pays a salary whether or not he's putting out content. Also, his Prime energy drink is putting out income whether or not Logan Paul is active or not. And his wildly famous podcast generates consistent advertising revenue. And then where he began, his YouTube channel, while he's not primarily focused on his YouTube channel, a lot of analysts say that his channel is still generating millions of dollars in ad revenue. So which one of these brothers has more upside financially in the near future? The good thing is both Jake Paul and Logan Paul are pretty young. Jake's 29, Logan is 31. So the future is generally wide for the both of them. A lot of people say that you're not going to reach your full earning potential until you're in your 40s. So as far as an earning path, both of these guys have a long way to go. So if we look at Jake, a lot of his future upside is dependent on boxing. However, he does have early seed stage stakes in companies like Ramp and Anduril, which are tens of billions of dollars in value. In fact, if he continues at this rate, he's probably going to be a billionaire by the end of the decade. And if some of those investments pay off, since he was an early stage investor, Jake could be dramatically worth more than he is without even throwing a punch. Now, if we look at his brother, Logan Paul, his future financial upside is really closely tied to the Prime energy drink. In fact, a lot of analysts are saying that Prime's valuation is geared towards $10 billion within the next 5 years. And if you take into account that Logan Paul's percentage is around 20% of that, that puts him in billionaire status. So I would say that in the near future, since Logan Paul owns such a large percentage of Prime, it probably gives him a clearer and more predictable path to a larger net worth than Jake Paul. But let's be honest, it's not really a massive difference between Jake Paul and Logan Paul. Both crazy rich guys, both really, really famous, both really, really smart. So you might be wondering who handles fame and money more maturely between these two young guys. So obviously that's a subjective question, but the data points towards an interesting answer, especially since Jake has leaned into controversy as one of his business strategies. The fights, the stunts, the provocative content, all that stuff has worked brilliantly financially for Jake Paul, but unfortunately it does come with various lawsuits, platform bans, and criticism from the public. In fact, I would probably say that his brand is built on controversy, and that's something that's hard to maintain over time. Now, if we jump over to Logan Paul, his career actually started the same way. If you remember back in 2018, there was a large controversy when he went to Japan. That was one of the most criticized moments in YouTube history, and it came pretty close to ending his career. But considering that, what happened next is actually pretty impressive. He used all of that controversy to go ahead and pivot into boxing first, and then getting a WWE contract, and he built legitimate mainstream credibility ability in both of those avenues. Now, if you compare that to television actors, they usually earn $1 to $2 million per episode if it's a hit TV show. So over the course of their career, they might make $50 million. Now, when you look at Logan Paul, he did that before he was 30, and he did that all while rebuilding a reputation that was nearly destroyed because of the Japan incident. I would say that's a real story of financial and personal growth. So is there anything that Jake beats Logan Paul financially? I would say yes. I want to be fair to Jake because he has this ability to generate massive profits and massive events in the boxing category. If you look at most boxers or most professional athletes for that matter, to generate $92 million just from one event is basically unheard of. So if you consider sheer earning power just from one event, Jake really has no equal in the influencer world. Also, between Jake and Logan Paul, Jake moved a lot faster. He built a $200 million net worth more aggressively and younger than Logan Paul. And then if we look at his investment firm Anti-Fund, you can see that Jake Paul has a financial sophistication beyond just boxing matches. So if his early stage investments pan out, we could see his financial net worth skyrocket past Logan Paul. So lastly, who's better with money, Logan Paul or Jake Paul? Based on everything I was able to look up, it seems to be pretty close between the two guys, but Logan Paul edges ahead just a little bit on financial fundamentals. Here's why. Jake has more money. Right now he has $200 million supposedly in comparison to $150 million for Logan Paul, but Jake Paul's net worth is closely tied to high risk, high reward bets, the boxing matches. Those boxing matches really depend on his health and also the quality of the opponent that he's facing. Even in his investment firms, they're doing really well, but there is a possibility those companies go to zero and are worth nothing. Also, his personal brand is built on controversy that requires constant feeding. Now, we compare that with Logan Paul. He built something completely different. If we look at Prime, it's a real company with real revenue, selling a real product in real stores around the entire world. In fact, it's to the point where Logan Paul doesn't necessarily need to do promotion for Prime for it to continue being successful. I would say that's the definition of lasting wealth, when you're making money whether or not you show up. So as you can see, Jake Paul is the flashier of the two brothers, but Logan Paul might be the smarter long-term financial builder. And given that they started at the same exact place, same city, same family, same financial means, it's interesting that they both ended up with two completely different financial structures, both really rich nonetheless. So there you have it. Jake Paul, Logan Paul, a financial breakdown. Which side are you on? Me personally, I like Jake Paul's showmanship, but leave a comment below. Let me know. See you on the next one.